Welcome. I'm Kim Wilcox, Chancellor at University of California, Riverside. First, I would like to respectfully acknowledge our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples. Today, this meeting place is home to many indigenous peoples from all over the world, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these homelands. May 5th, 1961, an important date in history. Now, to my mother, that's an important date because it was my 7th birthday, May 5th, 1961. But there's another reason it was an important date. That's the date that Alan Shepard became the first American to fly into space. And I remember that, sitting at home watching a black and white TV with my father. And I'll be honest, a little disappointed because the whole flight only took 15 minutes. Now, to those of you who were born in the 21st century, a 15-minute space flight seems almost impossible. Why would you bother? But to us in 1961, that was a huge step forward. Now, of course, astronauts spend months living in space with people from other countries. In 61, that certainly wasn't the case. It was us and the Russians, and we weren't going to get in the same space capsule together. A lot has happened in those 60 years since May 5th, 1961. But among them are so many good things and so many insightful things. It's interesting to listen to astronauts who will talk about the collegiality they have with their colleagues, the impressive technology that supports them in outer space. But nearly everyone that I've heard talk will talk about the opportunity to see the world from a different perspective, to see it from a distance, a perspective you simply can't have standing here on the ground, and to think about us as a community, a global community. And I can think of no better reflection or better time for such a reflection than now, in a year where we're struggling with financial crises and social crises and environmental crises, political crises, to have among us someone who has had the opportunity to see the Earth from a whole different perspective. It's an exciting time for us and exciting to have an astronaut among us here at UCR. But first, I'm going to turn the program over to a dear friend, Ninfa Delgado, who chairs the Chancellor Advisory on Chicano and Latino Affairs here at the university, for her comments. Ninfa is a dear friend, an advocate for education, an advocate for UCR, and a true Highlander. Ninfa?
Thank you, Chancellor. Bienvenidos and welcome on behalf of the Chancellor's Advisory Committee on Chicano Latino Affairs. We are pleased to co-host this amazing lecture with someone who is an inspiration to us all, José Moreno Hernández. We identify with and advocate for our youth, our students who face the many challenges of obtaining an education and achieving our dreams, but also the sacrifices of our parents, the values instilled in us, familia, cultura, education, and perseverance, to name a few, and the principles of hard work, ganas, and the belief que si se puede. My niece Kaylee has met and heard José Hernández speak a couple of times, first at the age of about 3, and today an almost 11-year-old dreams of all things space and of being an astronaut. She's eager to know about all the hard work that it takes to become an astronaut, to go into space, and what it's like. And I think this is the opportunity for our students of all ages, our young people of all ages, to hear your story today, Jose. Thank you for your influence. Thank you for your inspiration to us all. And again, on behalf of the Advisory Committee on Chicano Latino Affairs, welcome to the lecture today. Muchas gracias. And I'd now like to introduce Assistant Vice Chancellor of Community and Governmental Affairs, Elizabeth Romero.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce NASA engineer José Hernández, who wanted to fly into space ever since he heard the first Hispanic American had been chosen to travel into space. One of 4 children in a migrant farming family from Mexico, Hernández didn't learn English until he was 12 years old. He spent much of his childhood on what he calls the California circuit, traveling with his family from Mexico to Southern California each March, then working northward to Stockton area by November, picking strawberries and cucumbers at farms along the route. Then his family and him would return to Mexico for Christmas and start the cycle all over again, something that's very common to many of our families. After graduating high school in Stockton, Hernández enrolled at the University of the Pacific in Stockton, where he earned a degree in electrical engineering and was awarded a full scholarship to the graduate program at the University of Santa Barbara, where he continued his engineering studies. In 1987, he accepted a full-time job with Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, where he worked in a co-op in college. While working at Lawrence Livermore, Hernández worked on signal and image processing applications in radar imaging, computed tomography, and acoustic imaging. Later in his career, Hernández worked on developing quantitative X-ray film imaging analysis techniques for the X-ray laser program. Hernández applied these techniques in the medical physics area and co-developed the first full-fledged digital mammography imaging system. This system has been proven useful in detecting breast cancer at an earlier stage than present film screen mammography techniques. Hernández has won many recognitions for his work on this project. He has also worked in the international arena, where he represented Lawrence Livermore and the US Department of Energy on Russian nuclear non-proliferation issues. He was selected to begin training as a mission specialist as part of the 2004 astronaut candidate class. Recently, he also ran for Congress. What I appreciate about him is his warm and welcoming demeanor. You'll have a chance to catch him in a series that's going to be focus of a Netflix documentary, as well as catch him on TikTok. He's a co-star with his daughter, and it's been a pleasure knowing José Hernández and seeing his trajectory, and more importantly, his investment in our student population throughout the state of California. I've heard him speak from Sacramento to the Eastern Coachella Valley. So it's my great pleasure to welcome José Hernández.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for that very, very kind introduction. And before we begin, I would like to first thank a very good friend of mine, Dr. Nigel Williams. He is responsible for getting me here to UCR. He initiated the process and worked very closely with Dr. Guillermo Aguilar. And both of them took the proposal forward. And I want to take the chance to thank Chancellor Kim Wilcox for accepting me as part of the distinguished lecture series there at UCR. But I also want to thank Beth Clausen for her efforts in making sure everything worked out very well, and of course you, Liz, and Nympha for helping this along. So I would say let's get started with the talk, because they're not giving me much time. I tell you I can talk for hours, but I realize there's a time limit here, so we'll make it quick so that I give you the maximum information in the minimum amount of time. And so if we go to the next slide, please. I wanted to talk about the fact that even though this pandemic hit back in February of last year, we're all still adjusting to social distancing. And for someone like myself who used to travel a lot, it was actually great, novel at first, because you know you stay home but what happens is that it quickly becomes old. And so now you gotta learn how to live and be efficient in that new environment. And probably the fact that you don't know if this is gonna go on for a few weeks, a few months, God forbid, not a few years, adds to that frustration. And though it's a overused term, let's face it, this is gonna be the new normal. Even after the pandemic is over, we're never gonna go back to the way things were. I mean, there's companies already saying that employees are gonna be working from home, maybe come in the office once a week and things of that nature. So our world is changing. This is the digital era, communication era, and we need to adjust to it. However, what's very important is that we got to maintain throughout this, because of all these unknowns, we got to maintain ourselves physically fit and mentally healthy. And so to lay out the groundwork, next slide, please. To lay out the groundwork, I just wanted to establish a little bit of credibility of the 6 recommendations I'm going to give, because I wanted to tell you, training as an astronaut, training in isolation is actually something very common. One only has to look at those pictures that you're seeing there. That's off the coast of Florida. We do mission simulations underwater in a dry lab environment, and we do lunar analog missions. We do Martian analog missions. We even do moonwalks. Divers come in and they weigh us so that we feel 1/6 of the gravity of the moon. And we actually feel how it is to walk on the moon on the bottom surface of the ocean. And we do this for several weeks at a time. And there's only 4 or 5 of us in there. And so you learn how to live in a confined environment with very few people. We also do multiple cold weather training up in the mountains of Wyoming. They'll drop us off. We have cross-country skis. We have tents and things to survive. And they give us food, but they make it interesting. They do food drops such that you can't go from your base camp and bring it back. It's so far that you have to pick up base camp and you got to keep moving. So those are very extreme weather situations. Then they'll drop us off in the middle of nowhere in the wild, and they give you camping gear. This time they don't give you food. You have to search for your own food, hunt for your own food, look for streams for water, and so that's land survival training. And then you do water survival training as well. And then before a mission, they extract you from your family environment about 3 weeks before a mission, and they put you in what's called astronaut crew quarters for quarantine. They don't want you to get sick 2 or 3 days before a mission, so they pull you out, and now you have limited access to people. And why? Because you want to make sure that the mission doesn't get affected. And finally, you go off to a mission that could be several weeks to several months long. So in doing all this, it's this training that sort of helped me reflect about formulating a set of recommendations that I think could be useful everywhere. But before I make those recommendations, one thing I want to do is, next slide, please, just show you quickly some of the slides for the water survival training that we do. Next slide, please. Here's the wilderness survival training. And again, we're in fatigues, but we basically work in small groups, and we get to know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and basically develop good social isolation skills. And so what are these recommendations? Well, the first recommendation, next slide, please, is that you need to have a positive attitude. If COVID-19 has given us anything positive, is the fact that it has given us the gift of time of spending time with our loved ones. And so we need to cherish these moments and make sure that we embrace them and make the most out of them. You're able to create memories that otherwise, if you were in your busy schedule, like me traveling a lot, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do it. So look at the cup or glass half full, not half empty. Projecting positive attitude towards all this. Next slide, please. Second is good communication skills. At NASA, excuse me, at NASA, we typically repeat our procedures when we're going up in space or we're doing a mission, an analog mission or whatever, because our lives depend on it. You got to make sure you get it right the first time. And for example, I'll give you a quick example. We were coming in for a landing at Edwards Air Force Base in Southern California because the weather was bad in Florida, so we didn't land there. And one of the things I have to make sure as the flight engineer is to tell one of my pilots, Kevin, I say, hey, Kevin, check landing gear ISO valve open. And what does he do? He repeats it word for word. He says, Roger, Jose, checking landing gear ISO valve open. So he repeats the command to make sure I read it again to make sure I told him correctly. And then finally he says, check ISO valve open. Then he gives me the status to verify it's where it's supposed to be. because it's a life and death situation. That allows the landing gear to come down. You don't do that, landing gear is not going to come down, which would be a catastrophic event. Now, at home, it's not a life and death situation. Well, maybe in some families it is. In mine, it isn't. It's not a life and death situation, but it's good to repeat and have good communication. I'll give you an example. My youngest kid, I have 5 kids. My youngest kid is a senior in high school. And every Saturday, it's work trying to get him up so he can do his chores. And I remember one Saturday, I got up and I said, "Mijo, get up, please, because I want you to mow the lawn. I want you to clean the garage. I want you to walk the dogs. I want you to feed the dogs. And then I want you to wash the cars." And he looks at me, he gets up, he says, "Wait, Dad, you want me to mow the lawn? You want me to clean the garage? You want me to walk the dogs, feed the dogs, and wash the car?" And when he repeated it to me, it kind of dawned on me that, hey, I gave him too much. So I'm going to bring it down a notch, a couple of notches. I said, okay, do the first 3 only. What happened there? I avoided escalation of conflict, because when he repeated it with his good communication skills to make me hear what I had given him, I realized it was an unreasonable request for a high school kid to give him so many chores on a Saturday morning. And so I brought it down a notch and everybody was happy. Next slide, please. Next thing, and again, I was going to tell you that in space, it's very, very crucial that we have good communication. At home, I would beg to say it's also equally as important, though not life-threatening. Next slide, please. Next is create a schedule for yourself. Even if you feel you don't have many things to do that day, it's good to write them down because it helps you prioritize them, especially if you've got homework to do or you got work to do. You write them down and you prioritize them, and then and then include small rewards for yourself, like, hey, coffee break at 10:30, or I'm going to have a donut at 11, things of that nature. And why do you do that? You do that because it'll make you more efficient. It creates accountability, and it gives you the small victories at the end of the day that you can check off the things you said you were going to do. You did them and you feel very productive. So important to create a schedule and write it down. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned earlier, you need to bond with the family, but you got to bond in a quality form of way. In other words, not just being at home. You know, I mentioned I have 5 kids. They each have different personalities. For example, I have a daughter that was mentioned that she's a TikTok fanatic, big on social media. There's her TikTok account at Vanessa_ADE. And she gets me, she ropes me into coming on some of her videos. So if you want to see me make a fool of myself, log on to her account and you'll see plenty of videos of me and her. But that's what we do with her. Another daughter, she's a gym rat. And I have a weight bench, but I didn't have any weights. When I went to order them online, guess what? They were sold out. So what did she and I do? We went to Home Depot. We got 7 sacks of cement and we made our own weights. They're not the prettiest weights, but you know, a pound of cement is the same as a pound of steel. And we have a functional gym in our garage. My high school kid, we just got him an old clunker. I think it wastes more oil than gas. And I showed him how to change the oil, change tires. And now he's actually teaching me a lot of things about his car that, quite frankly, I didn't know about. Now he's learning a lot in terms of, he wants to be a mechanical engineer, so I figured that's a good thing. So do things that allows you to bond with the family, do things that they like as well. Next slide, please. Now it's the time to visit your goals. Everybody has goals. I have goals. And if you're like me, I have too many because half of them I'm not making progress on. Well, now that we have this pandemic, the top half I'm probably not making progress on anyway. So now it's the time to reprioritize and, you know, learn how to play that guitar online, or, you know, read that thick book you always, War and Peace, you always wanted to do, or do binge watching. You know, I just rewarded myself with binge watching the series from Netflix, Away, which is with Hilary Swank that goes to Mars for 3 years. And that was a good series. I watched like 3 or 4 episodes a night for like a week. And then I finally went through the whole series. Then I found out they canceled the series. So we'll never know what happens afterwards. But anyway, that's another thing. Next slide, please. Very important, practice self-care, self-management. In order to take care of others, you yourself have to take care of yourself. So keep mentally and physically fit, eat healthy, maintain a strong immune system, take your vitamins. Whatever it is you do, your regime, keep doing it, and practice good habits like washing your hands, following stay-at-home recommendations, and also wearing your mask when you go out. If you have meetings that you have to do and you could take them outside, that's probably a better thing than to be in a small room having those meetings. So, practice self-care, self-management, so you take care of yourself and you stay healthy. Next slide, please. Now, the 6 points I thought were important enough that I wrote them in one slide so you can commit them to memory or write them down, but it's have a positive attitude, good communication, create a schedule, bond with the family, set and revisit your goals, and practice self-care, self-management. You practice those, we're all going to get through this pandemic with flying colors. Next slide, too. However, having said that, it's okay to admit you're not okay with the situation. Sometimes I'm not okay with the situation. It's frustrating because I can't do the things I usually do. I can't travel to the places I usually travel to do my work. So it is frustrating. I recognize that. So it's okay to admit to yourself you're not okay with the situation, but it's going to get better. There's light at the end of the tunnel. The vaccines are coming. So hang in there and everything's going to be very, very good in the future. One thing that I try not to do is I don't watch the news constantly. I find that if I watch the news every other day for 20 minutes, I get the gist of what's going on around the world, around our country, around our state, and around our community. 20 minutes every other day. Don't be cling on to Fox News or CNN News, 24/7, because let's face it, bad news is what sells. And these networks are good at just displaying bad news. They never display the good news, or if they do, it's a sideline kind of thing. So, 20 minutes every other day, that's good. I mentioned about taking your meetings outside, keep wearing your PPE, and always have PPE stocked up and non-perishables. And I always tell folks, hey, you want change? The best way to create change is through our democratic process. Register to vote and cast your vote, and change will occur. Next slide, please. Now that I've talked a little bit about how we can survive the pandemic, I want to talk a little bit about my story, about how it was that I became an astronaut. And quite frankly, my story begins well before I was even born. My father started coming to California from the state of Michoacan, Mexico, at the age of 15 out of economic necessity. He quickly established a routine going up and down the state for 9 months, and then he will go back home. At 19, he meets and marries my mom in the same hometown, and she was all of 14 years old. Imagine getting married at 4. That's the way they did it back then, I guess. But the good thing is that my dad incorporates my mom into this corrida of going to California for 9 months and coming back to Michoacan for 3 months. Well, along with any marriage comes kids. And I am the youngest of 4 kids. And where you were born was dictated by what month you were born in. In other words, what country you were born in. And of course, if you guys know about probability and statistics, you know that you had a 9 in 12 chances of being born in California and a 3 in 12 chances of being born in Mexico. Well, my brother and I beat those odds. We were born peak of harvest, August and September, respectively. So we were born in our last stop in Stockton. I have my sister, you see her picture there in the middle. And my brother my other brother who took the picture there, they were born in the winter months and they were born in Mexico. So it was just the luck of the draw where you were born at. Now imagine how it was to that lifestyle as I was growing up as a kid. You see me in the picture there. I'm the one with the hat and the hoe, holding the hoe. Imagine what it was like traveling 9 months out of the year in California and going back to Mexico 3 months. Now imagine in kindergarten, my first experience with school. I go in Southern California and go to my class. I get to know my teacher, my classmates, and 2 months later, work dries up and we go to Salinas, Central California. I have a new kindergarten teacher, a new set of friends, and just as I'm getting used to that environment, the lettuce harvest is over and we move to Stockton. Now I'm up to my third kindergarten teacher, my third set of friends. We stay there for 5 months and then we get 3 months worth of homework and we go to Mexico. Next March, that whole process repeats itself. Not a very conducive environment to get a good education. And I think the things did not change for the better until I was in the second grade. In the second grade, my dad, we were at our last stop. It's November, typical time when we go back to Mexico. It was November, and he gets up and makes the announcement he usually makes. And he was very stern, a person who was short on words, but quick on punishment. You know what I mean? It's one of those parents that did not talk a lot, but certainly disciplined you if it needed be. And he gets up and he says, "Mijos, we're going to Mexico next week. Get 3 months worth of homework." Well, I was used to it already because I did it in kindergarten and first grade. And I said, I thought nothing of it. I said, yeah, Papi, we'll tell our teachers. So I went with my siblings to elementary school, Fillmore Elementary in Stockton. And I go to my second grade teacher, Miss Young. And I got to tell you, Miss Young was a young Asian teacher, probably about 3-4 years out of college, beautiful, tall, black hair. Well, tall relatively to a second grader, because I see her ahorita, pobrecita, está chaparrita, she's short, but she was tall back then. And of course, second grade, who's your first crush as a boy? You know, it's your second grade teacher. I'm guilty as charged. And so I go and tell Miss Young, I said, "Miss Young," she says, "Yes, Jose." I said, "My dad asked me if you can prepare me 3 months worth of homework because next week we go to Mexico." Man, she gave me a frustrated look, pointed the finger and said, "Tell your parents I'm gonna go and visit them tonight right after school." I got scared because the teacher never comes to our home. And man, when school was out that day, I didn't even wait for my siblings. I started running home. I felt like Paul Revere with the 2 lanterns. You know, the teacher's coming, the teacher's coming. I get home, and by that time, my parents always make sure they're home from working in the fields well before we come home from school. So we weren't latchkey kids. The parents were home when we got home. And when I opened the door to the living room, to my bad luck, the first person I run into is my dad. My dad's in the living room. He's always in a bad mood, grumpy. He's taking off his boots, 30 boots, because he just came home from working in the fields. And I said, well, I got to tell him. I said, "Hey, Dad." He says, "¿Qué pasó, mijo? What's happening?" He said, "Well, I talked to my teacher, Miss Young, and she says she wants to talk to you. She's gonna be coming over in about 20 minutes. And I think it has to do with," I didn't finish saying "with," when he gets up and he starts taking off his belt. You know, my dad has a different judicial system than the US system. He loves to first dole out the punishment and then he'll ask, "¿Qué pasó? What happened?" And that's the way my dad was. I don't know how I got away from a belt whipping that day, but I just threw everything to see what would stick on the wall. And apparently the fact that she wanted to talk to him regarding our trip to Mexico was enough that he did not whip me that day. But man, he was close. Now I got to tell my mom, where is every Latina mom, even though she worked all day in the fields? En la cocina, the kitchen, right? And of course, my mom, her routine was very simple. She would make us tortillas, sopita, frijoles, and she would feed us on the kitchen table there. But that was debate because after we ate, she would not let us get up until our homework was done. So that's how she corralled us into doing our homework every day. And if you were lucky, when she was making tortillas, she would make you a little ranita, which is a little frog. She would get the masa and shape it into a frog, put it on the comal, cook it, and give it to you, and you would eat it. It had a little bit of salt on it, and it was so good. But anyway, so she was making her tortilla. She gave me my little ranita, and she says, and my mom, completely different from my dad. She's caring, loving, nurturing, mijito esto, que mijito lo otro. All the opposite of my dad. It's kind of like yin and yang kind of thing. And I tell my mom, oye, mami, sí, mijito, here's your ranita. And there I'm eating it. I said, the teacher's going to come in about 15 minutes. I think she wants to talk to you about us going to Mexico. And she has a different reaction than my dad. She gives that Macaulay Culkin Home Alone look. Says, va venir la maestra, the teacher's coming. We got to sweep, we got to mop, we got to cook. And everybody started cleaning the house. And then we forgot about our homework and we started cleaning the house. But I love when visitors come because, you know, though I never went to bed hungry, we were very, we ate very, very frugal in the sense that it was also rice, always rice, beans, salsa, and tortillas. But when we had visitors, you know, the protein magically appeared in form of a thin steak or a pork chop or some chicken. So when she said, I got to cook something nice, I said, all right, we're going to eat meat today. So I was happy. So we had a great meal. Miss Young comes, we have a great meal. And then my dad invites Miss Young to the living room. My mom brings cafe and they drag me along. They drag me along because my parents could not speak English at the time. And Miss Young did not speak Spanish. So I was the official translator since she was my teacher. So there I go. This is why I remember this conversation so vividly, because I translated it. And Miss Young thanks my mom for the dinner, but she says, I'm not here to eat dinner, but thank you very much. I'm here to discuss the educational, the education of your 4 children. Oh, my dad immediately got stern. And I guess going through his mind is it's not a complaint of one kid, it's a complaint of all 4. And Miss Young saw how uncomfortable he got. She settled him down. She said, no, senor, don't worry. It's nothing bad. She says, I've had the privilege of having your 4 kids. Right now I have your youngest, Jose. And let me tell you, they all show great aptitude for studying. They love school. They do their homework. They're good kids. But your nomadic lifestyle is not allowing them to be able to get a good education. And my dad puts a stop to her right there and then. She says, hang on, señorita. I said, look, I recognize that my wife and I only have a 3rd grade education, but education is priority to us, to our kids. We want them to get a good education. So we're on top of it. They're doing their homework. They're good kids. And Miss Young said, yes, but this nomadic lifestyle, you go to 3 different school districts in 1 school year. You know what my dad's response was? He said, yes, señorita, but we moved during the weekend. And that was true. When we left Ontario, Chino area, we left, we went to school that Friday. We moved on Saturday. And on Monday, we were in the new Salinas School District in school. So my dad was right. We did not miss school because we moved in the weekends. And then Ms. Young says, yes, but you go for 3 months to Mexico. And my dad says, yes, but they take your homework. So my teacher saw that she could not get through to my dad. In my dad's eyes, he was meeting his commitment of giving us an education. Miss Young thought for a while and then she smiled because she got an idea. And she did something very brilliant. First, she elevates my dad, puts him on a pedestal. She says, Señor, your kids tell me that you have many years experience in agriculture. You must be an expert by now. Oh, you didn't have to tell that to my dad because my dad, you know, he puts up his collar and says, well, señorita, I may not be an expert, but I do have a lot of years experience. Can I help you with something on that? Oh, well, Miss Young smiled again because he took the bait. And she said, yes, you can. As a matter of fact, I have a problem that maybe it would help both of us. And my dad said, okay, tell me about it. Miss Young says, imagine I give you 4 fruit trees in potted plants, small fruit trees. My dad said, okay. So I want you to find the best land, dig 4 holes and transplant those trees to the ground. And I want you to feed them, water them the best you can, like a good expert. My dad said, yeah, I can do that. And then Miss Young says, but in 3 months, I want you to find another plot of land, dig 4 new holes, transplant those same 4 trees, but you're gonna take good care of them. My dad said, in a puzzled look, okay. And then Miss Young says, but in another 4 months, what's more, every 3 or 4 months, I want you to transplant those trees in a continuous fashion in new plot of land. You who are an expert in agriculture, Mr. Hernandez, tell me what happens to those 4 trees in the long run? My dad starts thinking and says, well, señorita, those trees aren't gonna die, but I will tell you this, you're gonna stunt their growth. They're gonna be small and weak. And if they're fruit trees, they probably won't bear fruit because the roots need to grow deep so that the branches can grow big and strong. He even raises his hands, big and strong. And you can count for like 2 or 3 seconds and you can see the expression of my dad change. He sheepishly puts his hands down. And I gotta give my dad credit because my dad is very proud man. But at that moment, he looked at Miss Young and said, is that what you mean? And Miss Young said, that's what I mean. She says, I think my job is done. She excused herself. My dad realized that that example was the example of his kids. And we still went to Mexico that year, but something happened on the way back. We didn't stop in Southern California. We didn't stop in Central California. We came straight to Northern California, Stockton. We made Stockton our home. We still went to Mexico every year, but our 3-month trips shrank to 3 weeks centered around Christmas vacation. And so that's when our education started to get traction. So a lot of people always say, okay, well, fine. Now you're getting a good education. You're settled down, but you're still a farm worker. You come from a farm working family. How does a kid dare to even dream to want to become an astronaut under those conditions? And I'll tell you, just like Chancellor Wilcox mentioned about the Apollo era, unfortunately, I'm old enough to remember the very last Apollo mission, Apollo 17. When we had the Apollo missions, we were sending humans to the moon. And Apollo 17 was the last mission. And they would televise the blast off, the walking on the moon, and then the splashdown, the capsule splashing down in the ocean. And I was lucky enough to watch the moonwalk, the very last moonwalk. We haven't been back to the moon since I was 10 years old. And, when they televised these events, the whole United States, the whole world for that matter, would stop and watch in amazement because given the technology we had back then, it was amazing we could send humans to the moon and bring them back safe and sound. And our family was no different. Only difference is that we had an old black and white console TV, vacuum tube technology, and with a rabbit ear antennas, kind of like you see with Peanuts right there. And when something important came on, my dad would send me to adjust the rabbit ear antenna to get better reception, kind of like what Linus is doing to Snoopy's ears. And sometimes when the image would go fuzzy when I let go and I grabbed it, it would get clear again. He would tell me, ahí quédate, stay there. So there I am holding the antenna while the whole family's fat, dumb, and happy on the sofa watching the moonwalk. Well, after they get their fill, they let me let go of the antenna and I sit kind of like how Charlie Brown is sitting in front of the TV there and watch astronaut Gene Cernan walk on the moon. And then I would go outside. It was nighttime and I would see the moon almost full. I would come back inside, hear and see not only Gene Cernan, astronaut Gene Cernan, talk to Mission Control Houston, but I could also hear and see the reporter, still remember his name, Walter Cronkite, give all these facts and figures about the moon, 250,000 miles away, this and that, and this is the last mission for about a few years until NASA gets a new vehicle on board, blah, blah, blah. And man, I was just hooked. I said, de allí soy yo. That's where I'm from. I want to be an astronaut. And you know, the best thing I could have done that day was to share that dream with my dad. Because as we were getting ready to go to bed, I told my dad, I know what I want to be when I grow up. 10-year-old kid. And my dad says, see, ¿qué? I want to be an astronaut. He stopped and he looked at me and said, you want to be what? I said, I want to be an astronaut. He looked at me and said, vamos a la cocina. Let's go to the kitchen. I got scared because only 3 things happened in the kitchen and 2 already happened. First one I told you about, my mom feeds us, has us do our homework, done. Second one, we eat dinner as a family at my mom's insistence, done. Third, let's just say that was a 2 shed. Now you know why I was concerned. So I go and sit down, same chair where I do my homework, and my dad sits next to me. He wasn't mad though. He was more curious than anything. He says, what's this, you want to be an astronaut? So I just regurgitate everything the reporter Walter Cronkite said that evening about what I learned about the moon and the Apollo mission and the new vehicle coming on board, that he looked at me and he must have saw the determination of a 10-year-old boy. And I remind you, this man only has a 3rd grade education, but he had the wisdom to do things. First, he empowers me to believe in my dream. He says, I think you can do it. Second, he says, if you really want to do this, you need to follow this 5-ingredient recipe. And I became a sponge. I said, dígame, tell me, what's that recipe, Papa? He said, simple, mijo. First, decide what you want to do in life. What does Jose want to be when he grows up? I blurted out, astronaut. Figure I'm 1 out of 5, I'm almost there. Second, he says, recognize how far you are from that goal. I looked at our linoleum floor in our kitchen, half peeling. We lived in a 2-bedroom dilapidated rental in the worst part of Stockton. And I told my dad, don't get offended, Papa, but I can't be any further than this. He kind of chuckled because he said, I'm glad you realized that, son, because the third thing is you got to draw yourself a roadmap from where you know where you're at and given by your smart remarks you do to where you want to go. You have to know the way. Draw yourself a map of how you're going to get there. I said, what's the 4th, Papi? You're doing it already, mijo. Get yourself an education. Prepare yourself according to your challenge. And you picked a doozy, he said. So you're going to have to go to college and go to college a lot. And then he says, 5th and final, he pointed outside the window. He says, you know that effort you put out Saturdays, Sundays, 7 days a week during the summer, working alongside your siblings, your mom and your dad, picking fruits and vegetables? I said, yeah, Papa. He pointed to my books and says, you put that effort there. He said, always give more than what people expect out of you. Always give more. He says, you mix that up, son, and that's the recipe to succeed. And so I went ahead and I put that recipe to work. I want to tell you guys, it works. I still use it today. That recipe works. I would add a 6th ingredient, and that's perseverance. That means never give up on your dream. A lot of people, human tendency is to give up after the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd failure, and then you move on to something else. I said, if you really want it, don't give up. Apply this recipe and don't give up, because I'm here to tell you that NASA rejected me not once, twice, 3, 4, or 5 times. 11 times, 11 rejections. It wasn't until the 12th time that I finally got invited to be part of the 19th class of astronauts. So this is why it's important to have that 6th ingredient, which is perseverance. Next slide, please. And I sort of summarized that. I sort of summarized that in, I thought I had a slide that summarized that, but maybe it's on the other one, on the next slide. But it's basically define your goal, recognize how far you are from it, create a roadmap to get there, prepare yourself according to your goal. Education preparation is very important. Develop a strong work ethic and persevere, never give up. You know, when I got selected, I trained for 2 years. I was an astronaut candidate. You still had to learn how to pilot a jet, still had to learn how to do an EVA spacewalk underneath the pool. And you do that and you take tests every Friday, take written tests, you take oral tests, you do simulation tests, and you gotta pass all that before you earn your wings. And if you wonder how hard that is, imagine when you're in finals week at a university, imagine 2 years continuous of that. Very stressful. It's like drinking from a fire hose, the information you're getting, but you get through it. And once you graduate, you're eligible for a flight assignment and you get assigned to a mission. Now you train 18 months for, in my case, was a 2-week mission to the International Space Station. And it was STS-128 aboard Space Shuttle Discovery. And it's this mission that I wanna give you a summary of what we did during this space mission. So if you put the next slide on, please. Now we can put on the video. I'll show you our mission. We launched near midnight. And the first thing that happens is the 3 engines light up. They're fed by the orange tank. A second later, the 2 light up. Now you know you're going somewhere, but you can't turn those puppies off. And those are only on for 2.5 minutes. Hop off, fall down with parachutes. I was covered in the wind. But the orange tank keeps the group empty. So it's 8.5 minutes powered flight. You go from 0 to 17,500 miles an hour in 8.5 minutes. I mean, that's the best ride Disneyland can ever hope for. As flight engineer, I'm sitting right behind the 2 pilots. Best seat in the house. I got the panoramic view, but it's also the busiest because I'm monitoring all 10 monitors of both pilots in case something goes wrong. And of course, you'll see me there give the thumbs up because now I consider myself a bona fide astronaut. At 8.5 minutes, we're traveling once around the world every 90 minutes at 17,500 miles an hour. Our crew was an international crew. This is Christopher Fuglsang opening up the payload bay doors to initiate radiator cooling. There's yours truly putting together the portable onboard computers that's going to help us dock to the International Station, while my colleagues there put together exercise equipment. You got to exercise in space, else you'll suffer muscular atrophy. Ladies want to be an astronaut? This is my colleague, Nicole Stott, engineer, also looking through binoculars of what's going to be her home for the next 3 months, International Space Station. In other words, we drop her off and we bring someone home who's been there for 3 months. It's called a crew exchange. Our second objective, we had 3 main objectives. That was the first one. Second objective is to install more than 7 tons of equipment, both inside and outside of the International Space Station. Most of that equipment is in that cylinder you see there called the multi-purpose logistics module. Here we are in the final phase of physically docking to the International Space Station. Remember, we're doing this, we're both going at about 17,500 miles an hour, but we dock to it. Once we dock, we could open the hatch, our respective hatches from the shuttle and the station side. Now through the docking rings, we got this neat little tunnel. We can float from one vehicle to the other. There's 7 of us on the shuttle, 6 on the station. The commander duties is basically divided up every 6 months between a US commander or a Russian commander. We had a Russian commander, Gennady Pedalka, but since I used to work in Russia a lot, I was able to talk to him and practice my Russian as well. They're happy to see us, not because we're good buds, but they know we have fresh fruit and vegetables. But remember, it's 7 of them, 6 of us, 13 representing 5 countries, truly an international effort. Here we are, once we connected the multi-purpose logistics module, we empty the contents both inside and outside. It's a big deal installing equipment inside. It's even a bigger deal installing the equipment outside. I'm the flight engineer, so I did not do any spacewalks. My colleagues did that, but I was the robotic arm operator. So I was kind of like their Uber in space. Took them from different places. They installed ammonia tank assemblies, antennas, cameras. After about 13 days, we undocked from the station And our last maneuver with the station is to do a fly around, 360 fly around, take high resolution video and pictures. Why? We want to make sure that micrometeorite orbital debris hits has not damaged the outside structure of the station. We then let the atmosphere capture us. Weather was bad in Florida, and the rules dictate that if they're bad for more than 24 hours, we go to our second site, which was Edwards Air Force Base. Remember, the shuttle took off as a rocket. We converted it to a spacecraft, and now we're landing it as an airplane. Truly a versatile vehicle. And here we are coming in for our landing at Edwards Air Force Base. This is the view of our pilots with the heads-up display. Landing gear ISO valve is open because the wheels do come down. You see that. As we land there at Edwards, I sort of thought about it. I said, man, this is poetic justice. Why? Because it's, you know, Ontario Chino is about 80 miles away. And this is where I used to pick strawberries. And here I am coming in for a landing as the flight engineer for the STS-128 mission aboard Space Shuttle Discovery. Truly a amazing journey. And that's the thing I want to make sure that I talk about also, is that once we set a goal for ourselves, I just want to remind you that you've got to enjoy the journey, because the journey is about 90% of time and effort. And if you're not enjoying the journey, chances are you've got the wrong goal for yourself. So you need to revisit that. But stop and smell the roses along the way and enjoy it. I also have a balanced life between family and professional life, because that's important too. Next slide is, I love showing this slide because this shows me kind of coming full circle. You see me there, how it started, 11 years old, driving a tractor on a farm. I used to do that. A little over 10 years ago, when I was getting ready to go to space. And now I have a 20-acre vineyard. You see my dad right there. He and I work it. And, you know, it's a great bonding opportunity with my father to be able to do this. And yes, we still pick grapes, but they're our own grapes. And you know, we don't stop there, because if you show the next slide, we don't stop there. Next slide, please. Because, you know, I sell the grapes to Corbel, which they make champagne. And I said, well, why can't I make my own wine? So I've started dabbling for the past 3 years and finally came with a formulation I like. And in March, I'm telling you right now, March, I'm going to have my own red wine and white wine. That is a Sauvignon Blanc that's going to be for sale online, Tierra Luna sellers. So you're over 21, you'll be able to order it, and you can tell me if you like it or not. But that's a activity that I'm very excited about, because it's something I always wanted to do, and now I'm doing it and I'm enjoying it. You know, will it sell? I don't know, but it's fun doing it, so I'm doing it. Next slide, please. Also, as I left NASA, I started writing books, and I have 3 books. Oop, you went one too far. I started selling books, and we have several books out there that you can look at our website if you want to get them. If you go through our website, the advantage is that I will autograph them for you however you want me to autograph them. But there's the my biography, self-penned. Very proud to say I wrote these books myself, no ghostwriter, Reaching for the Stars. Then the middle reader book level is From Farm Worker to Astronaut. And then there's a bilingual children's book, The Boy Who Touched the Stars. And based on that, what happened is, next slide is, as Liz had mentioned, is that Netflix, hot off the press, has signed me on to create a movie based on my life. They're trying to get Michael Pena to play me, which I think it's a good choice. And they already have the director, and I believe the script is pretty much finalized. So they want to commence filming, COVID allowing, middle of this summer, so they could have a 2022 release on Netflix. So pretty exciting stuff that's going on. Next slide, please. And like I said, I'm big on social media. You see my work site, website, my Twitter name, LinkedIn, Facebook. And I also have a foundation called Reaching for the Stars, where we serve the Central Valley and expose kids to the good gospel of STEM education, STEM careers. And we work closely with universities and community colleges here in the community. And we have a summer academy where the kids spend 5 weeks on a campus so that we get them used to living on a campus and being exposed in a campus environment so they can see themselves in it. And we teach them next year's curriculum in terms of math and science. So we're preparing them for college. So we do a lot of good stuff with respect to that. And having said that, I think I went a little over, but I think it was jam-packed with information. And I think I'll turn it over now to for any type of questions and answers or anything else that you guys may want to do. I am here. I hope you enjoyed the talk. And I'm not sure who I'm turning it over to, but here it is. Guillermo, that's right.
It's to me, Jose. Yes, thank you so much for such an inspirational talk. There's plenty of questions that are coming in. So let me start with one. Andreas, I'm pursuing a mechanical engineering specifically to qualify to become an astronaut. As the first in my family to go to the university and as a Mexican-American student, your story is inspiring. If you could give me a piece of tangible advice to reach space, what would that be? And what could I do to help me stand out as a candidate?
Well, the first thing you gotta realize is that I think the opportunities are ever increasing to have astronauts to go into space because it's not only NASA now. You've got companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic that are building their own space vehicles that are going to need astronauts. Now, having said that, the competition is very stiff. When I was applying to become an astronaut, about over 12,000 people who met the minimum requirements applied. Nowadays, it's over 18,000. So the one thing I would recommend for this student is that, first of all, you need to go to graduate school. It's almost a must. And it really should be all the way up to a PhD. So get your PhD in engineering, aerospace, mechanical, whatever area, but get your PhD. The thing I found is that when I got rejected 6 times in a row, I was ready to throw in the towel. As a matter of fact, I crumpled the rejection letter. The first one, I framed it because it said, "Dear applicant," didn't even have your name on it, just had the "Dear applicant," but it said, "We reviewed your application, you meet the minimum requirements, however, more than 12,000 people applied. We're sorry to inform you that you're not one of those selected for further interviews," because they select 100 finalists, and from those 100, they select 10 to 15. You're not selected as a finalist, but feel free to apply again. So they invite you to keep applying. So after the 6th one, I was fed up because no one likes rejection. So I threw that letter. I was in the bathroom shaving when I read it. I threw it in the round garbage can. I missed it. That's why I'm not a basketball player. And I'm glad I missed it because my wife picked it up and looked at it. And when she went down and told me, "Y esto qué es?" Because she's from Cotija, Michoacán también, grew up as a migrant farm worker. She said, "What's this?" And so I looked at it as an opportunity. That I said, "Oh, my wife's going to spoil me because I'm going to say, poor me, NASA doesn't want me. So she's going to give me a cup of hot chocolate, a piece of French bread, and I'll be able to feel good." And so I told her, "Pobrecito de mí," right? Poor me. And guess what? There was no hot chocolate. There was no French bread. There was no apapacho. Nothing. She looked at me and she said something that really stuck. She said, "So you're a quitter." Man, those were fighting words. I said, "No, I'm not a quitter, but look, six rejections." And she said, "Look, the letter says, feel free to apply again. I agree, NASA doesn't want you this year. I agree they didn't want you the past 5 times, but you don't know about the 7th, 8th, or 9th time. And if you don't apply, you know you're not going to get selected. And you're always going to have that worm of curiosity, what if?" So, and that curiosity is going to eat at you and you're going to become a bitter old man. So I suggest you rethink it. And I started thinking, I said, you know, she's right. I got to take this to its finality. So I kept applying, but I did something different. I started studying the people that were getting selected, and I came up with a 3-element strategy to reach your goal, to talk to this individual who asked about it. The first one is obvious: know the minimum requirements. You got to be in a STEM career. You got to have a bachelor's and a master's degree now. That's what, from what I understand. But a PhD would be good. And so everybody knows that. So I did that, and that's what I had been doing the past 6 years. But when I took a deep dive into the people that were being selected, I noticed they had something I didn't have. They were all pilots. I wasn't a pilot. So what did I do? I invested in myself, and I became a private pilot. So I got my pilot's license. Next year, I took another deeper dive, and I found out that they were all scuba certified. So what did I do? I drove every weekend from Stockton to Monterey, about 2.5-hour drive, and I became basic certified. I became advanced certified. I became master certified and scuba rescue. I wanted to make sure NASA knew I knew how to scuba dive. So I did that. So the second element is look at the people you want to be like. Make sure you got the same type of training, same type of habits they have, so that you can be success oriented. That's the second element. The third element is create a differentiator. And the way I created a differentiator was, remember, it was mentioned that I went to Russia in the nuclear non-proliferation project. It was a project for 5 years that required traveling to Russia 6 or 7 times a year in nuclear non-proliferation efforts to help the Russians take control of their nuclear stockpile once the Soviet Union broke apart. And I went. No one wanted that job. Why? Because it was in Siberia and lots of travel, and no one wanted it. But I said, put me in, coach. And you know why? Because I read in the newspaper that the US and newly formed Russia Federation were going to build that International Space Station together. So I took 2 and 2 and put 4. I said, this is my differentiator. I'm going to get experience working with the Russians, but then I'm going to go to my boss and say, hey, boss, now that I'm going to Russia and this is a 5-year project, doesn't it behoove me to learn the language a bit? And can you give me a one-on-one Russian language instructor? And he said, yeah, we got continuing education budget. You can get that, knock yourself out. So after 5 years, and that's how I got the intention of NASA, is you start building on your resume. Every year I started asking myself, what can I add to make myself more attractive to NASA? So that's the recommendation I have for the students that aspire to be astronauts. I said, man, go all out, get your PhD, be a pilot, be a scuba diver, learn a third language from one of our international partners. It could be Japanese, it could be German, but learn a third language.
Thank you, Jose. We have plenty of questions coming in. I don't think we'll have time to sort them all out, but hopefully we can pass them along to you later, so
Sure.
you can reply to them. I'm gonna follow up with another one. Someone's curious to know your thoughts regarding any resources or strategies that you have utilized throughout your education.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Guillermo.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. They want to know what are the resources or strategies that you utilize throughout your education, which you feel many students today do not take advantage of.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me tell you, I was a good student in high school. And when I went to a 4-year university and started undergraduate engineering, and I got enrolled in Fortran programming, calculus, physics, and a humanities class, I was getting my butt kicked. That's when I realized that not all public schools are created equal. Even though I was a good student in my high school, top of the class, kind of top 10, I was actually failing my first semester at University of the Pacific because I wasn't well prepared. And what did I do? I did something that I did 2 things, basically. The first thing I did is I went to the tutoring office, and man, I signed up for tutoring in calculus and physics. I needed help in those areas. And that helped a lot. But I didn't stop there. I became friends with a group of students, and it was 4 of us, and a couple of them were what I would say smarter than me. They were better students than, more well prepared, if you will. So they captured the concepts a lot quicker. And one needed more help than I needed. So I was kind of like the intermediary, which was perfect because the more advanced students explained it to me at a level I could understand, but the person that needed more help didn't understand it. So what did that allow me to do? That allowed me to absorb, learn the material, and then reteach it to the person that needed more help. So it reinforced me to by explaining it to the other student, the concepts that I learned from the more advanced students. And all of a sudden, I started catching up. That curve sort of put me on the level playing field with the rest of the students, and I graduated cum laude. But it was because of the fact that I was proactive. And you don't wait until finals week to do this, or you don't wait till the middle of the coursework to do this. You do this the very 2 or 3 weeks into your course. You're gonna know if you're gonna have trouble or not. And if you know you're gonna have trouble, you gotta be proactive, man. Be proactive in tutoring, study sessions, and just go after it. Take advantage of office hours of your professors. I don't care if they get mad at you, they're there because that's their office hours. You're supposed to be there. And so don't feel bad that you're taking time away from them. They have their published office hours, and that's why they're there, to help you.
Thanks, Jose. Let me take a crack at one, maybe 2 more before we close. How did you come about making the transition from NASA astronaut to flight engineer to now entrepreneur?
It was tough. It was tough because, you know, when I came back from my mission, they announced that the shuttle fleet was going to be retired. So there was 4 more missions after mine before the shuttle got retired, and those 4 missions were already assigned. So there was no chance of me getting assigned to another mission. So so the only game in town for the next 10 years, because it was going to take 10 years before NASA gets another vehicle up and running. The only game in town for the next 10 years was to travel with the Russians on the Soyuz. And that was great. I didn't mind that. What I did mind is the fact that you had to sign up for a 3-year training program where 80% of your training is in Russia. And then you're up for 6 months continuous. And then you're on the road for 6 months talking about the mission. So that's a period of about 4 years where you're gone about 85, 90% of the time from your house. I mentioned I have 5 kids. My oldest at that time was 15. And then I have a 14-year-old, then I have a 12-year-old, then I have a 10-year-old, and then I had a 7-year-old. And they were coming into their teen years, and I figured this is the time when they need both parents around. So I didn't want to, you know, I felt I was crossing the line, being egotistical with the family, that I felt it was the toughest decision I ever made in my life, is to quit NASA. Because I was there, I was an astronaut, and how was I going to give up a flight to the International Space Station? But you know what? Familia comes first, and I made that hard decision. It was tough. I adjusted, I accepted it, and it's great because now, you know, that 15-year-old, he graduates this summer from Purdue with his PhD. He has 2 masters, a bachelor's in aerospace engineering. Guess what he wants to be when he grows up? He's already applying because he has he's getting his PhD. I have 3 of my girls already graduated from college. One's working on her master's. And then my son, the youngest son, he's a senior in high school. He's getting ready to major in mechanical engineering. So we got to get him to college, and then I'll be done. But you know, it was a tough decision leaving NASA, but you know, I felt that it was the right one, because of the stage in our lives we were in, that it was probably better to do that for the sake of my kids and my family. And so I've never regretted it, but tough decision it was, yes.
Thank you, Jose. Well, I think we're approaching the end. Let me just give you a last one, and then we're going to have to close. Sure. What's your opinion about or your thoughts about the increased activity in space from private companies, such as SpaceX?
Well, I think anytime you could get private industry to invest $1 in space exploration, it's $1 less the taxpayer has to pay. So I'm very pro private space exploration. A lot of these companies are working with NASA, so that's good. But a lot of them are doing it on their own, and that's good too. I think you know, space should be accessible to everybody. I kind of cringe when the U.S. started a space force, because I thought that was unnecessary. You know, I'm not blind. I know the U.S. and other countries have developed some type of military capabilities in space. That I know. But to bring it out in the open and legitimize it only gives an open invitation for countries like China and Russia to develop their own space arsenal, if you will. And now there's a space race, arms race, which to me, it's unfortunate. I had my way, I would do away with the Space Force, put everything back into DARPA, Department of Defense, and let them develop or the Air Force, and let them develop their technologies the way they were doing it before. But now you're kind of like a moving target, and it legitimizes it, because now every country can say, well, you got a Space Force, why can't we develop our weapon systems? And so from my perspective.
All right, Jose. Well, thank you so much again. There's plenty of comments of a lot of the people who attended that really loved your talk. We'll try to make those available to you. So I just want to close by thanking again our speaker, Jose Hernández. This was a very inspirational talk. Thank you all for coming, and please stay tuned for more of these talks in the future. So thank you again, and on behalf of everyone here at UCR, good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guillermo. Thank you. Thanks to everybody. Appreciate it.